I was down to my last $20 and a half pack of stale cigarettes when I saw the ad. Caretaker wanted, room, board, generous pay, discretion required. It was wedged between a dog grooming coupon and an obituary on the community board outside the liquor store. I wasn't sure why I stopped to read it. Maybe it was the word discretion, or maybe it was just the thought of a warm place to sleep. I tore off the bottom slip with the number and called it right there on the curb, my breath fogging in the late autumn air. A man picked up on the second ring. His voice was dry and slow, like pages turning. "Mr. Dean Caldwell?" I hadn't said my name. That should have been my first red flag. "Yes." "You'll want to come to 318 Willow Street, 3rd floor. Ask for Mr. Finch." The line went dead. I didn't have a lot of options, so I went. The building looked like it hadn't seen daylight in decades. Wallpaper peeled like old skin, and the elevator stank of rust and something sweeter, like spoiled fruit. I took the stairs instead. Mr. Finch's office was at the end of a narrow hallway. The door was cracked open. Inside, everything was brown: the carpets, the drapes, the desk. Even Mr. Finch looked like a man drawn in pencil. Long, bony fingers, thin lips, pale gray suit that didn't quite fit his sharp frame. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, without looking up. "Sit." I did. No handshake. "You've no record of violence, no immediate family, no criminal charges of note. That is acceptable." "Is this about the job?" I asked. "Blackwood Estate," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Located in Pine Hollow. Isolated, historically significant. You will be the sole caretaker. Cleaning, documenting, minimal upkeep." I flipped through the photos. The place looked ancient but oddly elegant. Ivy-covered stone walls, tall iron gates, windows like watching eyes. The interior shots showed wood-paneled halls, velvet chairs, grand staircases. A little dusty, maybe, but nothing I couldn't handle. "You will not leave the grounds after sundown. You will not invite anyone inside. You will not attempt to contact the family. They have been removed from this arrangement." "Why?" I asked. He smiled thinly. "They no longer remember they own it." That should have been my second red flag, but when he handed me a check for $5,000 as an advance, I took it without a second thought. I arrived just before sunset the next day. The estate rose up from the trees like a wound in the forest. Sharp edges, broken windows, a kind of old anger baked into its bones. The gate was unlocked. My boots crunched the gravel path as I made my way to the front door. The key turned easier than I expected. The inside smelled like dust, old wood, and something else I couldn't place, like wet stone. The air was colder inside than out. I flicked on the lights. They worked mostly. The chandelier above the foyer buzzed faintly, casting long, shivering shadows. There was a table near the front window. On it sat a thick, dusty journal with a cracked leather cover. No name, no date, just one sentence scribbled on the first page. "They say the walls remember everything." I don't know why, but that made me shiver more than the cold ever could. That first night, I didn't sleep much. I set up a cot in one of the smaller rooms near the back of the house, far from the massive drafty halls. It had a narrow fireplace, an old dresser, and faded floral wallpaper curling at the edges. I left the journal on the bedside table, still open to that first page. They say the walls remember everything. I told myself it was just some poetic nonsense, probably a housekeeper or bored relative scribbling spooky lines to scare kids. But around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps. They were slow, not like someone sneaking, more like pacing, deliberate, heavy. I froze, listened. They were above me, then, without warning, to the side, then behind the wall. I got up, grabbed the flashlight Mr. Finch had left me, and stepped out into the hallway. The air was still and dry, but it felt wrong, like it was waiting. I walked toward the stairs, shining the light up to the second-floor landing. Nothing. But when I turned to head back to my room, I heard it again. Not just steps this time. A faint scratching. From behind the wall near the library, I pressed my ear against the wood. The sound stopped immediately. I waited. My own heartbeat sounded too loud in my ears. I whispered to myself, "Old house. Mice, maybe. Just mice." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was listening. In the morning, I found a strange cold spot in the library. It was one of the grandest rooms. Tall shelves, half empty, an old globe by the fireplace, a ladder on rails that creaked every time I walked past it. but one corner near the stained glass window felt different. The temperature dropped 5 or 6 degrees as soon as I stepped near it. My breath fogged. There was no draft. I checked, and while I was scanning the area, I caught something. Not directly. It was in the mirror. The library had this full-length mirror with a black wooden frame, cracked slightly in the top corner. As I moved past it, I saw a shadow in the far right corner of the room, a vague figure, standing, watching. I spun around. Nothing. But when I looked back at the mirror, it was gone. That evening, I returned to the journal. The second entry was more detailed, more frantic. The voices come at night. They sound like people I knew. Sometimes they say my name, but the mouths never move. I see them only in reflections, always out of reach. It was signed with initials, RT. I closed the journal and looked at my reflection in the window, where night had settled fully. For a second, I thought I saw someone behind me, just a flicker, a shape. When I turned, of course, there was no one there, but I didn't sleep in that room again. I moved my cot to the hallway. I spent most of the third day wandering the halls. I told myself I was just familiarizing myself with the place, but really, I was avoiding the mirrors. That morning, while sweeping the East Wing hallway, one of the few duties Mr. Finch had actually mentioned, I noticed something strange, a door I hadn't seen before. It was flush with the wall, wood painted the same faded cream, nearly invisible unless you were looking at the angle I happened to be. No knob, just a small iron keyhole. I pressed my hand against it, freezing, like the wall in the library. I leaned closer and, maybe it was just my imagination, but I thought I heard something from the other side, a soft rustling, like paper dragging across stone. I stepped back. Nope. I whispered aloud, like that might stop whatever was inside from listening back. Back in the library, I dug through the drawers beneath the shelves. Most were filled with dust, crumbling receipts, wax-sealed letters, and yellowing papers I couldn't read. One drawer at the bottom was stuck. I tugged hard, and it slid open with a wooden shriek. Inside, a rolled-up blueprint of the estate. It was dated 1913. I spread it out on the library table, brushing dust off carefully. The place was bigger than it looked now. Several wings were crossed out in red ink, with one note in the corner. Do not unseal the East Auxiliary. The door I found was in that wing. Beside the red ink was another scribbled phrase, silence binds it. Later that afternoon, while going through the attic, I found a box of old maintenance tools and keys. Most were rusted beyond use, but at the very bottom was a single tarnished iron key. Its teeth were jagged, oddly shaped, almost ceremonial. The tag on it had one word, written in old pen, forgiven. That night, I had a dream. I was a child again, standing at the edge of a field behind a stone house. The wind carried a low hum. My mother, or someone who looked like her, stood at the door of the house and whispered something I couldn't hear. When I turned to ask what she said, her face was gone, just a smear of skin. I woke up soaked in sweat. The next morning, I returned to the hidden door with the iron key in hand. It slid in with a click. The door creaked open an inch by itself. I stood there for what felt like minutes, staring into the pitch-black space beyond. The cold hit me in waves, the kind that crawls under your skin and stays. I could barely see anything, just the faintest outline of steps leading downward, and then I heard it, from deep below, a child's voice, humming softly, the same tune from my dream. I don't know what pushed me forward. Curiosity, fear, something else. But once the door was open and that voice, that soft, distant humming, reached my ears, I stepped through. The air shifted instantly. It was colder than anything I'd felt before, not just in temperature, but in feeling. Like the space didn't want me there. The staircase descended in a tight spiral, made of stone that felt damp under my hands. Each step groaned as I moved, my flashlight barely piercing the gloom. Dust hung thick in the air. The humming continued, childlike, tuneless, but steady. Halfway down, the smell changed. It wasn't mold or rot, not exactly. It was older than that, like books buried in wet soil, like breath trapped for years. At the bottom was a narrow hallway. The walls were lined with cracked portraits, each one worse for wear. The faces were all smeared, not painted that way, but as if they'd been scraped with fingers, violently. At the end of the hall was a door that didn't belong. It was red, newer than anything else I'd seen down there, perfectly smooth, almost glowing faintly in the dark. My hand shook as I reached for the handle, half expecting it to burn me. It opened silently. Inside was a nursery. Tiny furniture, a wooden rocking horse, shelves with old toys and children's books. Everything was coated in dust, but it looked preserved, like someone had tried to keep it intact. And in the center of the room, a circle drawn in chalk on the floor, its lines jagged and incomplete. Symbols I didn't recognize. Some of the lines were smudged, as if someone had tried to erase them. The humming had stopped. I stepped inside, careful not to touch the chalk. There was a pile of drawings on the small desk near the wall. Childlike sketches, messy crayon lines. Most were stick figures standing near a tall house. But one made my chest tighten. A figure, long arms, no face, standing behind a boy drawn with blue scribbles for a shirt. Me. I staggered back. There was a noise behind me, a soft scuffle, like someone shifting their weight on the floor. I turned fast. No one there. The rocking horse creaked, just once. In the far corner of the room, I saw a pile of papers and what looked like a journal wrapped in cloth. I knelt and unwrapped it. The cover was cracked leather, the pages nearly falling apart. The handwriting started neat, then grew jagged and rushed. Most of it was unreadable, but the few lines I made out chilled me. The ritual was never finished. The child was taken too soon. It still hungers. It remembers the echo of loss. Another page. He was mine. The house took him. The house keeps what we try to forget. My hands trembled. As I turned the page, a scrap of old browned paper fell from the binding. A drawing. The same faceless figure from my sleep paralysis, standing behind a crib. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear dropped onto the page and smeared the ink. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the foot of the stairs, the dusty journal in my lap, trying to process what I had seen. My mind kept returning to that drawing, the figure without a face, and the blue-shirted boy. Me, or someone who looked like me. The silence in the house now felt loaded, like something was holding its breath, waiting. I went back to my room around dawn, legs heavy, head pounding. I thought I might finally rest, just for a little while. But the moment I shut my eyes, I was somewhere else. I was back in the nursery, only it was wrong now. Warped. The ceiling too high, the rocking horse in the corner twitching as if blown by wind that wasn't there. Shadows crawled along the walls. I stood frozen in the center of the chalk circle, and I wasn't alone. Behind me, slow breathing. I couldn't move. Then it whispered. No language I recognized, just a garbled rasp that curled through my mind like smoke. My heart thundered. I turned. Nothing. I woke in my bed, drenched in sweat. But the journal wasn't where I left it. I found it in the hallway, just outside my room, its pages open, as if someone had flipped through it. I swear I hadn't moved it. And that's when I noticed something else. My reflection, not in the mirror, but in the glass of the picture frame above the desk. For a split second, my reflection didn't move when I did. It just stared. It wasn't the first time either. All day, I kept seeing flickers, people standing at the end of hallways who vanished when I blinked, voices that sounded like my own, speaking back to me in strange tones. At one point, I heard my mother's voice. I swear to God. Come home, Eli, it said, muffled from the other side of the wall. My name. Not since I was a boy had anyone said it that way. I tore at the wallpaper, my fingers raw, convinced something was behind it. There was nothing but crumbling plaster. Later, I found more blueprints in a drawer near the front of the house. One of them showed a room that didn't exist, at least, not in the house I'd seen so far. A room labeled simply, The Echo. I traced my way through the halls, mapping it out by the drawing. When I reached where the Echo room should have been, just behind the study, I found a solid wall. But as I pressed my ear to it, I heard it. Voices, hundreds of them, overlapping, whispering nonsense. And then my voice, saying words I hadn't yet spoken. It doesn't let go. It becomes you. I stumbled back, heart racing. Later that night, I saw something in the mirror again. I had just come out of the bathroom when I glanced back. My reflection lagged behind me, then smiled. I didn't. And for the first time, I realized the estate wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and it wanted to remember me. even if I didn't remember it. By the next morning, I was a shell of myself. I couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. My hands trembled constantly, and every time I passed a mirror, I looked away. I didn't trust what I'd see. I needed answers. I returned to the nursery, clutching both journals. I sat cross-legged on the creaking floor and read every single page. I skipped nothing. The entries in the older journal, dated over 50 years ago, described rituals, strange gatherings of the Rememberers, a group obsessed with preserving memories inside spaces. But not just normal memories, traumas, regrets, shame. The writer said Blackwood Estate was a vessel, built not to house people, but to hold echoes, emotional imprints so intense they warped space itself. The more I read, the more the handwriting deteriorated. Sentences broke apart, scratched through with shaking lines. The final entry wasn't even written in words I recognized. It was more like pictographs, childlike, frantic, repetitive. At the bottom, a drawing, the same faceless figure. The walls around me seemed to throb. The air pressed on my chest. I stood, suddenly aware of a pressure behind me. The echo room. I don't know how I got through the wall, whether there was a seam I hadn't noticed or if the house itself allowed me through. All I know is that I blinked and I was inside. It was a circular chamber, no windows. The wallpaper peeled in massive sheets, revealing pulsing veins in the wood underneath. The walls shimmered, faintly glowing with a sickly green hue, and in the center, a chair. Someone sat in it. My legs moved before I could think. I stepped forward, and the figure lifted its head. It was me, not like a twin, not even like a reflection. Older, eyes hollowed, skin pale, mouth quivering like it was trying to scream without sound. I staggered back. What? What are you? The figure trembled. Then, it spoke in my voice. You forgot. You made us forget. That's the price. I didn't understand. What price? The walls throbbed again. The chair splintered and sank into the floor. The other me stood, raising a shaking hand. I buried it, I whispered, more to myself than him. I buried something, a memory. Suddenly, my chest seized. I remembered a woman, a scream, running down the estate's halls as a child, a door slamming. Silence. The image was sharp, undeniable. I had been here before. The estate wasn't just haunted by others, it was haunted by me. All the memories I had locked away, grief, guilt, fear, had seeped into this place, and the house kept them alive, fed on them. The lights above flickered. I was surrounded by voices now, laughing, crying, screaming. One of them sounded like the woman from my vision, another, like my own voice, but younger, desperate. The other me reached forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. You have to choose, he said. Forget again, or remember, and set it free. The pressure grew unbearable. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, I shouted. And then, the house groaned. A low, guttural noise, like wood snapping under pressure, like the entire structure was breathing. The figure stepped back, the shadows surged, and I stepped forward, toward the center, toward the truth. The center of the room pulsed beneath my feet, like standing on a beating heart. Every breath echoed, not just through the space, but through me. My head spun with memories not fully mine, or maybe ones I'd long rejected. Faces, voices, fleeting touches. The other version of me, the older Eli, was gone. Dissolved into the walls, maybe, or returned to whatever echo he'd been carved from. I was alone, but not. The whispers intensified. I stepped forward again, into the pulsing light that rose from the floor. Something ancient stirred beneath it, something that was never human. A presence. An entity of memory, built from pain and permanence. It didn't speak in words. It pressed into my skull with meaning. The house wasn't just haunted. It was alive, fed by echoes, built by guilt, held together by fear that refused to die. And I had given it enough to feast on. I knelt, breath catching in my throat, and did the only thing that made sense. I remembered. I let it all in. The child I was. The woman, my mother, locking herself in that hidden room after my father died. Her grief, unspoken. Her final act, left out of family records. I'd been here. I had seen her body. I had screamed, and then I was sent away, told it never happened, told it was all a dream. A lie so strong I'd believed it for decades. Until now, a violent wind erupted from nowhere, tearing through the chamber. The symbols carved in the walls began to glow red. then black, and then nothing. Silence. I opened my eyes. The room was gone. The walls plain. No pulsing, no voices, no bleeding wallpaper. Just a dusty space filled with old furniture and cracked plaster. The echo had stopped. I stood and stumbled through the estate. The halls were quiet, cold, but normal. Whatever force had dwelled here, it had released its grip. Or maybe it had been me all along, feeding it with fear and denial. Outside, the sun pierced through clouds for the first time in days. I stood on the front steps of Blackwood Estate, feeling lighter but hollow, like a bell after it stops ringing. I stayed one more night, just to see. There were no whispers, no reflections out of place. I packed the journals, the drawing, and the blueprint. I locked the estate behind me and left the key in the mailbox. Mr. Finch never answered my calls. I'm not even sure he exists. Maybe he was just another echo. It's been weeks now. I sleep better. But sometimes I hear things, not in the walls, but in the edges of my dreams. The echo of my own voice, calling to me from the dark. I remember, and that's the price. But I also know this. Some places are built to last. Others are built to hold what we cannot. And if you ever find yourself standing in a hallway that feels too long, too quiet, too cold, turn back. Because some houses remember more than they should, and they never forget who fed them first. Do you think a house can actually absorb memories? Like, really take on the weight of what people try to forget inside it? I still don't know if Eli was haunted by something real, or by himself. Let me know in the comments what you think really happened at Blackwood Estate. And don't forget to subscribe for more twisted horror stories just like this one.